Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this webinar regarding about petrochemical. I hope you are not too exhausted from the long week and you have still a bit of energy left in the tanks. So this day we will talk about Petrochem, but the next webinar is already planned. It will be about oil and gas, petrochem, and energy transition, so the global energy market, and we will focus on, or we'll have a look on the year 2023, and to start the forecast of 2024, what's ahead of us for the next year. So the date is also settled. It will be after the yearly break on the 9th of January. It will be a Tuesday. Anyway, you will receive all of you the link for this webinar, and you will also receive the slides of today's webinar, so you don't have to make screenshots of this webinar. You will receive all the material. All the material will be at your disposal anyway. Quick recap for those who don't know us. I believe most of you. Sorry, I will start with the agenda, my bad, before going on the details. Start with the agenda. We'll have a first outlook, let's say first helicopter view of the markets, of the petrochem markets, and start gradually to deep dive within the petrochemical application, ending with the recycling focus on that applications. As usual, if you have any question, feel free to ask them, but ask them in the chat. This way we can address all the questions at the end of the webinar. That will be easier for everybody. Okay, now for those who don't know us, well, I guess most of you know already Jean-Charles, who is the founder of To Be First Consulting, and Jean, who is our CEO. For those who don't know me, I joined the team beginning of this year, and I'm in charge of the Central Europe, being based in Germany. Well, quickly, we'll jump on that slide. I think you all know, I don't know who is working with. Maybe I saw some of your companies in the slides, but I would like to focus on the database itself. So the database is growing, and now we have more than 1,500 projects. It's growing not only in terms of projects, but also in terms of applications. So for energy transition, we recently added 2 new applications, the waste battery recycling that we see growing, and direct air capture as a new technology, or another technology of carbon capture, but also a third new application, which is actually between in the petrochemical market, which is polysilicon, as a direct result from the demand of solar PV. I will now let Jean talk about the market, and I think we'll start with the news, starting with the, if I'm correct, the European view on that position.
Yep. Thank you, Jack, and thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are going to start just by, let's say, as Jack mentioned, the helicopter view. The idea here is to talk more generally about what's happening on globally around the market. And one of the key discussions which is going on today is a discussion around fossil energy, if it has a future abated or unabated. And okay, if you're not familiar with the terms, that's totally fine. We're going to explain. But in fact, it's a notion that came in Europe, where before Europe was starting to find an agreement to stop all the production of fossil energy by 2035. And what is happening now, as we see it, is that the position of Europe is starting to move a little bit, and it's going to the direction of stopping what is so-called unabated fossil energy by 2035. And so what is the difference between abated and unabated? In fact, it's a story of compensation. Regarding EU discussion, what is abated fossil energy is either oil, it's coal, it's gas, natural gas as well, where in fact during the production and transportation you have a reduction in terms of methane emission by 80%. Okay, so it means that you have a lot of carbon capture, you avoid the leakage, you avoid the flaring, and during the usage of this energy, you reduce the CO2 emission by 90%, which correspond to carbon capture more or less, or CO2 recycling later on. Knowing that this reduction is only viable for, let's say, industrial usage. Okay, it's not for a car or something like that. So that's what the EU is trying to push, and many European countries are going to find an agreement around this abated fossil definition. And Europe is going to try to push a motion at the COP28 starting next week in Dubai to find a global agreement on stopping the abated fossil energy by 2035. Let's see how it's welcome. But as we have been talking for more and more webinars and meetings to now, we see the world shifting really to sustainable energy with a high component of decarbonation. So let's see how it goes at COP28, but at least the proposition is on the table. No, as we are going to talk about Petrochem and we mentioned energy transition, it's quite interesting to see that one of the drivers of Petrochem today is the energy transition. So it's not completely direct link, but what we see, and here I put just an ad from the American Fuel and Petrochem Manufacturer Association, AFPM, which are making communication currently of we make the ethylene that makes the cells that power people beyond the grid. And in fact, if you look at the component of solar cells or windmill, and especially the blades into windmill, you understand quite quickly that you need a lot of petrochem product because all of this material is not natural material. It's mostly epoxy resin, for example, for the blade of windmill, but to the size and to extent which are quite massive. And for our solar cell, you need a lot of silicium and a lot of carbonate product. So it's quite interesting to see that one of the drivers behind Petrochem augmentation is also the energy transition and the production of, let's say, the equipment for this energy transition and especially the renewable asset. So what we clearly see that, like any other sector, carbon remain quite central in the construction of this energy transition, and of course that should remain and pursue in time. Last part of the Petrochem news that I wanted to share is really piece of news that I found really on the last 2 weeks, if I may say, where you can see it's shooting everywhere. From top left, you see that it's Vietnam, which is trying to have some push from Saudi Aramco investment into Petrochem and refining. You have Iraq, which is launching about a bit more than $8 billion of investment in Petrochem project. Kazakhstan is also pushing quite quickly for and quite strongly on Petrochem because as many producing countries, they want to have not only the upstream and midstream layer, but have also the Petrochem layer to create more value from the national resources. Same story for Iran, with 9 projects and a bit more than 5 billion investment, which is also quite massive. And then you have other countries like India here or let's say China through the arm of Saudi Aramco, where those countries really want to develop their petrochem asset to supply petrochem product to then later their industry. And of course, any industry worldwide, the first supplier is always petrochem. So if you want to have a strong industry, you need a strong petrochem. So it's different strategy from many countries around the planet, but all of them drive to the same direction. Okay, a push for petrochem project. So it's quite interesting to see that it's quite a global phenomenon. Now, if we look at what are the drivers behind, one of the key component, and here I put a graph from Bloomberg. Today, okay, there is no alternative from petrochem. Okay, if you look at plastic, if you look at any refined product, gasoline, etc., there is no alternative. Meaning that you can put as much renewable you can find on the planet, you will never pass yourself from plastic. You can never pass yourself of all the components that are going to compose an iPhone or anything like that. So it's true that even though we are making an energy transition, Petrochem should remain. And behind the Petrochem, I would say, activities, it's really the carbon molecule that we cannot replace. Okay, we can make a lot of things with electricity, but the carbon molecule is going to have a long future ahead of us, and that's what is happening. If you look now into and we break down the oil demand per sector, in fact, Petrochem is the fastest growing demand for oil and gas. It can be for oil, but it can be for natural gas. And on the graph here on the right, you see in blue the volume year to year from oil, which is going directly to Petrochem. And okay, we started, I would say, 5 to 10 years ago with the ranking of 6 million, or no more, like 7 million barrels per day, which were going directly to Petrochem, to the situation where today we are closer to okay, getting of 10 to 12 million barrels. And by the future of 2050, it should be around maybe 17 to 18. So it's quite clear that today Petrochem is driving the demand for oil and gas, and for many reasons behind that we are going to explain. But bear in mind that this Petrochem market is going to increase, and that's also going to drive the demand for oil and gas as a global driver. So now, what is behind this Petrochem? It's quite evident that today the long-term growth is driven for Petrochem products, and here on the example of plastic that I've taken, by the demography. In fact, you have a direct correlation in the variation between Petrochem and population. And you have a kind of a double effect. The first effect is as soon as the population grows, okay, number of inhabitants, you are going to increase the volume of demand for plastic product. And of course, upfront plastic is Petrochem project. So just by having 80 million new inhabitants on the planet, which correspond to the population of Germany, you have a growth in the demand of plastic and then Petrochem. The second correlation from this demography is based on the standard of life. And here you have quite a clear correlation between GDP, standard of life, and demand for plastic product. It's not me saying it, okay? That's the International Energy Agency, which have identified this pattern back at the beginning of the century. And if we look at the production in millions of tons of plastic, with all the variation of plastic, you see that we started with a situation, I would say 50 years ago, where we're using a bit less than 70 million tons per year. So the situation we are here today, more or less, where we are already exceeding 400 million tons, to the situation where we should top a kind of a plateau at 600. So again, having an addition of 50% in the next 30 years. So it's quite massive, this growth of plastic. And it's quite interesting to see what is driving the demand and this increase in demand. I just took this graph from ICIS, which shows the consumption of plastic and all the polymers according to the profile of the country. On top here in light blue, you have the consumption across on the last, I would say, 30 years from the developed countries. So let's assume North America and Europe. And it's quite stable, to be honest. It's not going down, okay, even if we start to recycle quite massively, but at least it's not increasing. Then on the bottom in dark blue, you have the situation of developing countries, especially Africa and Southeast Asia countries and South America, where you see the consumption is evolving steadily but slowly, let's say. And then you have the example of China, which is in green, where, of course, China has gone through a hot run on the last 30 years in terms of development of a standard of life, and where you can see that, okay, the consumption of polymer is just skyrocketing. Now it seems that this growth is starting to fade away, so it's not stopping, it's not completely flat, but it's, I would say the curve is slowing down a little bit. But of course, you have countries like India today, which are starting to increase more or less on the same pace that China was having 20 years ago. So just I would say phase by phase, population and those massive population are growing their consumption of plastic, and of course that's what is driving globally the demand for plastic, and before that the demand for petrochem product, and even before that the demand of project. So it's quite interesting to see that this demography effect is not going to slow down in the future. At some point the population will slow down, but in number of inhabitants, but the standard of life will still catch up. And by having one of the other effect, you will have the demand which will still grow quite massively. So that's really one of the key driver today behind Petrochem request. Now, in terms of project, okay, because we talk about what are the news, what are the drivers. Now let's go to the project. Here on the left, I listed all the project we have, part of the project we have in Petrochem category. So you see it's quite massive. Of course, the main categories, and I'm going to focus on the few key applications that we identified, are of course the refineries, all the ethane and naphtha crackers, all the oleofins, and then all the chemical specialties to produce each part of, I would say, the carbon cycle that you can find on the planet. And it's quite interesting to see, if we're looking at the capex, that after a slowdown during COVID, that the capex forecast is going up again. Okay, it's going up slowly, but it's going up, which was not really anticipated, I would say, before COVID, and that we have started to see happening after it. Then it's going down. Doesn't mean again that the market is collapsing. Just reflect the vision we have from Project Smart Explorer into those market. Note that the forecast, if we look what has been awarded, it's quite clear that, okay, 2023 is still lagging a little bit behind 2022, but we are still 2 more months to go. And with the last few announcements, which have been quite massive, most likely we will catch up and we'll end up 5% most likely above what has been done last year, meaning that, okay, we are restarting this ramp up of investment in Petrochem. Even if we will have a look into it, depending the application, the situation is a little bit different. But it's quite interesting to see it's going up. It's going up in a steady but slowly increase. And what is quite interesting also is to compare, I would say, the past with the future. And that's what here I try to do in this slide, where I focus in 3 periods. You have the date here on the left. The first period is 2016-2019. The second period is 2020 to 2023, and then it's the future, 2024 to 2028. And here you have the number on the first column of projects, then the capex and the top 3 region. What is quite interesting is to see that it's almost the same figures for the first 2 periods. Okay, 2016 and then 2020, where you had 63 projects, topping a total of 300 billion, which is quite massive. Honestly, it's over the span of 4 years, of course, so it has to be kind of smooth a little bit, but it's quite massive. Now, if we look at the future, what is a bit more interesting is to see that we have I would say a decrease in number of projects, clearly on the period, but we have an increase in capex. And we have quite a strong decrease in number of projects, because that's almost 20% decrease in number of projects, but there is a huge increase by 30% in terms of capex. And clearly what we see more and more is to have less small unit of Petrochem, and what we list in the database, at least from what we see, is to have more and more complex Petrochem complex with more or less all the spectrum of carbon product you can produce, because it's true that if you have, for example, only one ethylene cracker, you are quite limited in number of output products, and it's not enough, let's say, to produce or to supply a whole industry. So what we see more and more is to have Petrochem complex with all the output, to make sure that whatever, I would say, the industry you're starting to attack behind, you can provide the whole portfolio of product. Also because more and more the plastic are getting more complex, and they need combination of many products to be built. Now, in terms of region, you see there has been a shift going on, and which is increasing now. Of course, the market has been highly dominated by Asia Pacific on the last, I would say, 10 years, more or less, which was representing half of the market. And where a quarter of the market was made by Middle East and another quarter was made by North America, with Africa taking a small part of it. Europe and South America remain marginal, and they should remain marginal. Now, in the future, what we see is that the part of Asia Pacific is reducing the market share quite massively. In terms of number of capex, it's remaining quite constant, but in fact, other regions are increasing faster, are increasing the market share. Middle East is the first one shooting. They really, all the OPEC countries really wants to start, let's say, their Petrochem project to make sure that they don't only sell the raw material, raw oil and gas, raw oil and raw natural gas, but they want to, let's say, sell the added value from those projects to create more value from their resources. And that's more or less the same situation we see with Africa, which in a span of 10 years passed from 7% of the market to 16% of the market. It's not a small increase, it's a massive increase. And also we start to see South America playing that game. Especially if we think about it, Brazil, which is lining up FPSOs, but want also to have their own capacities of Petrochem. So it's quite interesting to see that the market is boiling in different regions now, because the strategies are starting also to be quite different as well. If we look more in the detail, the future, so the period 2023 to 2030, so really long range, the profile of operator is quite almost unique, where you have 70% of the market, which is made by the national companies. It's no surprise. That's something, a trend we have seen starting on the past, but it's taking quite a huge momentum, where the company who have access, I would say, to the field, to the resources, to the production, are the one who want to build up the value of these petrochem activities as well. And that's why we see them investing massively into the market. And then you have independent companies taking 1/4 of the market, more or less. Mostly in USA, if I may say, to create value from the shale oil and shale gas. That's where we see them quite active, with also some activities for small unit in Europe. So it's quite interesting to see that today this market is totally not into the hands of international oil companies. Most of them have made the strategy in 2014 to refocus on upstream, midstream. They were thinking about changing this strategy, I would say, before COVID, because it might have been profitable. But since COVID, they have repushed even more toward upstream, because that's where they make more money today. And the last piece of news I'm sure you have seen from Exxon and Chevron about their acquisition and merger are proving that they want to go even more upstream somehow, and not so much looking at the petrochem and downstream activities. So it's quite interesting. I did put you the map here with each green dot being a project, and you see that, Asia Pacific is still, I would say, the main corner, but Middle East is really taking a huge momentum, and Africa is standing behind and increasing with a faster pace. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what the market will be in 5 years from now in Africa. But most likely that will be quite interesting region to go as well. No, in terms of requirement, if the region of the project have changed, if the players have changed as well, the requirements are changing fast. And today, the key requirement is decarbonation, and behind decarbonation, the carbon footprint. There have been many projects which have been delayed, and where the feed of the Petrochem plant has been redone and renewed. Because of two aspects. First, the electrification. I think that's a must-have in every design today if you want to get your license to produce, or your air permit, for example, in US. And the three key components of those new design are integrating electrical crackers, even if they consume way more energy to do it, and we are not sure about the source of electricity. Everyone wants to have those crackers in electrical mode. And also, all the compressors are now driven what we call E-train. Electrical motors are driving the compressor. It's less and less gas turbine. There is almost no new project with gas turbine now on the market because it's almost impossible to get the support or the financing for those projects because gas turbine are high emitters of CO2 and methane, which is even worse. And then in a section of those motors as well, what we see the trend is to go for high efficiency motors. So for the experts who are online, mostly going to synchronous motors to have a super high level of efficiency, almost 90% on the project. The second brick, I would say, because this electrification is more on the process itself into the operation. What we see is also, let's say, post-unit being added to new projects. For example, where the gas turbine are going to have a carbon capture unit directly on them. But of course, this carbon capture is not only going to focus on the gas turbine, but also on the chimney and all the gas that are produced in the meantime to let's say avoid any flare or any CO2 release to the atmosphere. What we see also is some units of CO2 recycling, especially with green hydrogen, to reproduce green methanol or syngas or e-fuel, as they call, depending on where you stand on the planet, trying to recycle a little bit those waste. And it's quite interesting to see because it starts to be quite beneficial to make sure that in the vision of being, let's say, carbon neutral by 2050, to have those units, because, okay, you can adapt them to existing process, to your knowledge, and you can create more value by recycling the CO2 than just paying a carbon tax, for example. And the last requirement, which is quite interesting, is digitalization. There is one phenomena which is quite interesting that today it costs more money to decommission a petrochem plant than to upgrade this petrochem plant. Which means that, of course, most of the company, even if the assets are 60 years old sometime, are going to revamp those assets and, of course, put a huge level of digitalization because there is a lot of value to be created from capturing the data itself, of course, but mostly to run, for example, predictive maintenance algorithm or process, I would say, digital twin to optimize the consumption of energy, for example, or the quality of the product at the end, because Petrochem project can be really tough and complex processes. So by having this layer of digitization, you can make sure that at least you optimize your consumption of energy and also you optimize the quality of your output product. And that's quite interesting to do because the cost of investment is really small compared to the earnings you can make later on. We have quite few examples from ExxonMobil or from Air Liquide, for example, which have been really good at this game as well. So I would say between those three categories, electrification, carbon capture, digitization, they are the main mottos of all the new projects of Petrochem we see going on around the planet. Not just a focus per application, because as I say, the situation can be quite different. If we focus just on refining and let's say only revamp of existing refineries or expansion of existing refineries, it has been quite slow. It stopped really before COVID, to be honest, in 2019. And it's starting to go up slowly. Honestly, we thought that, okay, it will slow down to non-existent almost by the past. But in fact, those refineries are benefiting from the effect of reducing the carbon footprint, which is a target of many operators around the planet. So most of them revamp their refineries because it costs less than revamping, for example, an upstream platform offshore. And the reduction of CO2 are quite massive as well. So it's a quick win for any players who want to reduce its carbon footprint. And it can be a pre-treatment unit, it can be post-treatment unit, CO2 recycling, etc. But many applications are happening. And here, as you can see, it's mostly dominated by 84% of the project by national companies, because for national companies, again, the carbon footprint belongs to the government. So they have really easy to put a ticket on the table to make sure that, okay, they have the refining and they keep it running because they need it for themselves, for their own population, but also they can reduce with a huge volume the carbon footprint. So it's quite interesting. In terms of region, I mean, you can see on the graph itself, if you take Middle East, Asia Pacific, and Africa, you cover 90% of the market. So it's just massive. None of those projects of revamp are happening in Europe. This is something to note as well. But it's happening quickly. And okay, so we're not talking about small tickets because that's a market where you have a vision till 2025. So it's quite big and quite long term, and which should invest about 30 billions every year. Here I show you the map, but as you can see, it's really into the trench between Africa, Middle East, and Asia, Southeast Asia mostly. Now, if we talk about, I would say, new refineries, and that's why we rename it for the reason I mentioned at the beginning, refineries and petrochemical integrated complex. So those are really big boys in terms of investment and ticket. Usually the average project is between 5 to 10 billion capex. And here the market is really complex because there is a slowdown in this market because new design are coming up. Many projects which were starting their design in 2020 have been back to redo the feed to integrate decarbonation and all this electrical and carbon capture package. And that's why you see that this market is steady and with a big boom starting next year. We hope most of those projects to be ready and to go into the execution in 2024 because, of course, all the standards have been published in 2021 with the low carbon efficiency. So the time to adapt those standards, to pass the feed, and then to take the final investment decision, most likely they would go to execution next year, sorry. And what is again quite interesting to see that 80% of the market is again into the end of the NOCs. You can also remark that there is no project worldwide which is made by an international oil company. So it's quite strong, quite amazing. And here, okay, it's even more brutal in terms of scope because those markets are for half of it in Asia Pacific, a quarter of it in the Middle East, and the last quarter is in Africa. Okay, so you see the market is not in Europe, it's not in US. Those big boys are really into the developing market and market which have access to the production or access to a navy increase of plastic demand or industry demand later. Here you see the graph, each green dot. Again, Egypt is quite a center, but India is playing a strong game here as well. So it's quite interesting to see that in few regions you can cover most of this market as well. Now going to the cracker of ethylene and all the polyethylene variation. Here the market is clearly increasing, as we say at the beginning, that the market and the trend for usage of plastic is increasing worldwide. So of course, all the cracker, and if you follow Petrochemical, I'm sure you are aware of that, you see that the market is going up. And the forecast is followed clearly by what has been awarded with a steady increase after 2020 and with the market this year, which is already existing, outlasting last year, and it should end up about 10% higher than the previous year, 10 to 15. We're not sure yet, but it's quite massive. Ethylene cracker are really a convenient project for countries. What is quite interesting is to see that here, at the opposite of the refineries, IOCs are playing the game because the demand for plastic and ethylene is really massive behind, and that's why they also want to arm themselves with those assets to make sure they're not missing the beat. And here, what is quite uncanny is to see that Africa is not represented, more or less, with only one project. But at the opposite, you have North America, which is quite well represented with 25% of the market. So you see, it's really who has access to the gas for the ethylene cracker. So who has access to the natural gas and who has the need in terms of plastic demand to go after and to have those projects. Quite an interesting market, honestly, because it's highly condensated in few engineering companies. So of course, if you have them or they have you in your vendor list, it can be quite a good opportunity. In terms of category, you see, so it's no new region, I would say, in US, and here in Middle East, the same story. Okay, it's not changing that much neither. Then if we dig down into the Petrochem, and there is almost an unlimited deepness into the application. So here I start really to go into specific product, which are acetic acid, methyl, monoethylene glycol, and polysilicon. And here what is quite funny to see is the shares of independent companies. And what we see is more and more, I would say, chemical companies, not BASF, because BASF is a big boy, but smaller company, sometimes even family business, which were operators or in the chemical business, almost pharmaceutical business, going up into this Petrochem scope to go and produce those products, which are sometimes well needed. For example, the polysilicon is a masterpiece to produce solar cells. And of course, when you have solar panel starting to ramp up around the planet, you need more and more demand on those products, which are quite expensive today on the trade market. So many players coming from other industry are growing there because there's a lot of money to be made. And here the forecast is going up, quite a linear increase. And what is awarded is more or less following the same pace, where to interest ratio would last all the other year. Here it's quite well distributed. You see projects in Europe because some chemicals companies are in Europe, but China is really leading the game, I would say, in terms of countries. So it's also quite a hub if you are there. No, in terms of center of decision, because we talk about a lot about the region of the project, but that's not only the region that you should focus on, because if we look at where the FEED and EPC are going on, Europe is well represented. Okay, because in many cases Europe can be a licensor, for example, but the two first regions in terms of engineering are for the FEED Europe, North America. North America being mostly located in around Houston, I would say, and then Asia Pacific. So you have about 1/4 for each to 1/3 for Europe. Then for execution, it changed a little bit because a big share of projects which are designed in Europe are sliding down to Asia Pacific for execution. It's less the case for North America. But okay, it's no surprise. Also, you have to bear in mind that many companies which are having a FEED offices in Europe have also offices from the same company in Asia Pacific. So for example, if we take Technip as a benchmark, sometimes the project is FEED design in Europe, can be in Paris, or it can be in Roma, and then they send it back to Asia for execution. Because the cost can be more competitive, etc. But we still, let's say, a link to Europe. So again, if you are based in Europe, doesn't mean that the market is passing under your radar, because just from the decision center and the design, you can play on a huge part of this market. No, just having a word about recycling, and that's quite a key element there. Because we talk a lot about Petrochem as it is, but Petrochem is not shy of its energy, let's say, transition. And what we see is a lot of, let's say, pre-treatment unit, which can be waste to plastic recycling, so really raw plastic taken from the trash as waste, which are grind to small pieces, and then put back into the cracker, to also pre-treatment unit of bio-waste, for example, which are going to come as a feeder of existing refineries. And we see those bricks of recycling as really a good key, a good solution, honestly, because when you see the price of the barrel today, it become not competitive, but almost competitive to have those brick of recycling next to Petrochem units. And of course, if you take into account the carbon footprint of those recycling, it become even more interesting to have those units. And that's why we see a huge interest today into those waste recycling, waste to chemical, waste to plastic application. Honestly, each quarter we discover a new process, to be honest. And it was something which was more or less not existing before, and which today representing about 5 billion this year in terms of investment. So it's mostly small projects which are re-pilot and demonstrator, but we know that behind those pilot and demonstrator, there is line up a phase 1 project to industrialize the capacity. And of course, when you see how aggressive are the trend of investment to reduce the carbon footprint worldwide, most likely that would be a good solution to do it. In terms of region, where it's quite interesting to see Europe playing a big role with 30% of the market. 1/3 of the market is North America, for the simple reason that there is a lot of public funding for this project, and there is also a lot of Petrochem activities. So it's a good fit for both combination, if I may say. But Africa is also playing quite a big role there as well. Support by, I would say, a global investment, notably from the World Bank. What is also quite interesting, if you look at the profile of the players, about 93% of the project are made by independent companies. So not to say that they are doing everything, but almost everything. Most of them are small companies, which were not existing, let's say, before COVID. So they can be startup, they can be spin-off of university, they can be brand new companies to look at those material, and of course trying to take a spot on this waste recycling market to create the license and then license their technology to all the operators all the way. So it's quite interesting. It's a brand new market that you can explore. If you are used to the Petrochem market, okay, it's just one step away to go on those applications. But again, this market is really driven with a high pace of development, with a high increase. So it's maybe even less competitive than the Petrochem market itself. So it can be a quite good timing to jump on those new applications as well. Here, in terms of scope, you see Europe really being the high density of project, and US also playing a big role there. Going to a conclusion, and I see time is running fast. Just to sum up all the points we have said, but bear in mind, and that might be one of the first takeaways, to say that the carbon molecule stands still at the core of our life, and it should remain this way for the future. The idea is also change its usage and its production to be less harmful to the environment. But honestly, we hardly see how it could disappear. If you're in your office or at home today, look around. What is made of plastic? What is made of glue, of paint, etc. Almost all our world is made from petrochem product, and it will be hard to replace everything with just putting electricity. Okay, electricity is not a material; it's not a molecule, so hardly replaceable. No. What is also quite stable for the future and quite well identified, that you see that refining and more all the petrochem product output is correlated to demography, and that should not change in the future. And of course, that should even amplify the effect, and that's what is clearly driving the demand for project of petrochem and refinery, and upfront from that also the demand for oil and gas. No, most of the project, if 4 projects over 5, so 80% of the projects are in Middle East, Asia Pacific, and Africa. So really, I would say, in a more active developing region of the planet. So it's not, I would say, a foreign region if you work in oil and gas and petrochem. So just that, US and Europe can be a little bit less interesting. Projects are increasing. Honestly, it's well identified as well, especially from our database. It's a slow increase. It's not doubling every year like could be energy transition, but it's increasing. And it's quite interesting to see because there are, in terms of equipment and quality requirement, interesting application as well. And now, bear in mind that we are a little bit at the bottleneck, or at the end of the bottleneck today, because many projects have been postponed or delayed to add, I would say, decarbonation and electrification bricks to the design. But normally, no, they should start up, or let's say in a few months, start up quite quickly. And there, the market will free a little bit in terms of project, in terms of final investment decision. So it's also for you the good timing, if you are not doing it already, to promote your electrical solution, your digitalization, whatever that can reduce, I would say, the carbon footprint or decarbonate, because you will have a lot of e-ring. because compared to I would say oil and gas, where the lifetime of a project can be 40 years, Petrochem project for all the new design that we see, they are built for 60 years. Okay, so of course the investment of capex versus opex is quite a different discussion as well. And now bear in mind that this market is highly dominated by national oil companies. For the reason we mentioned before, they have access to the resources themselves, or they want to build up industry, so they want to build up the client of their Petrochem plant. But independents are really flipping the game, especially running by those units of recycling and decarbonation. So they can be quite good door opener for you to enter those markets if you're not there, or just to have an organic growth into those markets as well with new players, new companies, but which are really active into this market.